Good evening and welcome to your favorite program, the special program from the University of the West Indies Open Campus, Dominica. And tonight we have a very special guest. Some of you would have heard him in a lecture, a distinguished lecture of the NBD, National Bank of Dominica, and the University of the West Indies some time ago, some 3 or so Thursdays ago. But he's with us now on our special program to tell us about social security and Caribbean economic development. Let's have a feast tonight because I know you will enjoy everything that he has to say in a very, very comprehensive way. Let us now take a break for our sponsors. Who else? The University of the West Indies.
I'm part of a tough, smart,
constantly evolving,
never too old to learn community of human beings.
proud of country,
Proudly Caribbean, global citizens.
with convenient access to over 400 learning programs
Delivered both online and face-to-face.
from the Caribbean's University of First Choice.
My mind,
My life.
my world of possibilities is wide open.
Call, click, or visit the UWI Open Campus.
As usual, we allow our guest to introduce himself. So I will call on, and many people have said, when you give his name, you have already introduced him. I cannot avoid this. He's not a fountain or some ghost, so we must give name, and then he will give us the ingredients of what he's made up of. This is Professor Karl Theodore of Trinidad and Tobago, you may say, and a member of the UWI family. Welcome to Dominica, Dr. and Professor Karl.
Thank you very much, Felix. Well, I am, as you said, my name is Karl Theodore, and I am the head of the HU Center for Health Economics, which is a research center we set up in St. Augustine to really look after the needs mainly of the ministries of health right through this region. We realize that health is one of the central issues facing the people in the region, and in every country there are serious problems. And we thought that, first as economists, but as social scientists, we thought that we could really make a difference. And what was interesting is that most of us who are in the center, in fact, our background is in social security and it turns out that some of the work that we have continued to do, in fact, even though we are the Health Economic Center, is work in the area of social security. I think if I could make one last point, I think it's one of the things we always try to say is that the work that we do in this region has to be work that is focused on the development of the region. We talk about development, and I think people in the region always, need to remember that when we talk about development, it's because there are some problems that we seem to have that are not going away at all, and we look to our development plans to address those problems, thinking of problems of poverty, problems of income distribution, problems of unemployment. So we're looking to change the way our societies function in a way that we could bring an end to these kinds of problems. And the work that we do in the HU is always directed at that kind of thing.
So there you have it. Who else could introduce himself better than him? And to always put a balance to our programs, you know who we have on the other end of the spectrum, the sociologist par excellence, Dr. Francis Severin. Good evening, Dr. Severin.
Yes, good evening to you, Felix, and to Professor Karl Theodore. And as I always do with my guests, Prof, welcome to the nature island of the world, actually, we love to say now. And
very
it's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
In fact, Prof. and Felix, when I listened to the lecture, you know, the various points that you raised, that you broached, in terms of economists, and economists worth their salt, having to engage themselves in development topics, you know, it brought home very forcibly to me that, you know, this business that we are in, education, is a very important one. And if we cannot transfer education to skills, to applied skills that would make people productive and perform at a level that will bring about some transformation, some metamorphosis in their society, then we're failing. So that what your lecture did for me was to reinforce something that I had always believed in, that those pillars, health on the one hand and education on the other hand, are important pillars for bringing about wealth, for bringing about wisdom, for bringing about wellness. And if I may, part of the purpose of the University of the West Indies is to unlock that potential. But specifically, if I'm treating with the open campus, the idea was to bring that education beyond the walls of the academy, to take them to the people in a way that is accessible and palatable. And for me, that is what the lecture series, and particularly your lecture, has done. So I want to thank you for that.
Okay.
Yeah, and let me add to that, Dr. Severin, if I can possibly add to what you have just said. I followed the lecture. Incidentally, it was live on QFM radio, which, as the person delivering the vote of thanks, I was sure that we were live. But the language, which was so very fitting, didn't violate any broadcasting rules. And I should have said that to Professor Karl Theodore, that it sounded like a calypso, very good calypso. I know you may be saying at home there, he looks a little bit like Chuck Doss. Well, they have the same ilk, that is social commentary, but very serious commentary. And what I would like him to inform us again is his concept of development, because that, as I myself think, from my limited view of development, usually in terms of infrastructural development, we may have a big school, but I'm not too preoccupied with what is taught in it, just that we have a big school. And that is for many, like myself, we are satisfied that is development. Professor, what is your take on the word development for particularly the Caribbean?
Well, development, I think I want to link it with something Francis said about education. You know, my father always used to remind us that the word to educate means to draw out of. It doesn't mean to put things in people, to draw out of. And I think the two things I think that we're seeking to draw out, first is what people have in them, what people believe, the sort of values that people have, but also what kind of capabilities they have that could benefit other people. And when you think about it, so education and development go hand in hand, because development, as one of our early economists, Willie DeMaas, used to tell us, is not just about economic growth. It's not just about putting things on the table that people to eat and giving people things that they can have. Development is about creating in the society a kind of feeling among people that this is a good place to be. This is a good place to live. This is a good place for me to bring up my children and my grandchildren. And I think when we think about it like that, we understand that although the growth is important, because what the growth does, it puts more things, it brings more things in the society, so we have more things that we can share, and there are opportunities to lift this sort of standard of living that is true. So the growth is important. We are not saying it's not important, but you can have all the nice things you want if the relationships in the society are relationships that are, if you don't have a society where people are looking out for one another, having those things wouldn't matter. So that we tend to say that what we want from our development is to the creation of a society where people feel happy to be where they are. They know they can, if anything happens to them, they can depend on some sort of support, and they can look forward knowing that what we are doing today is not going to make it worse for those who are coming after us, because that is another very important part of our development, that to ensure that whatever we do today makes the world, that the place we are going to live must be a better place for those that are really coming after us. To me, that is the bottom line.
Okay, I just quickly want to ask you, you made mention of values, and what I, as a young man, knew when growing up, some of the values that my parents and neighbors passed on is that Caribbean people were hard-working people. They loved to save. They respected each other, and the concept of the extended family. How does that fit in the values that you made mention of in the overall development of people, or the maintenance of those values for future development?
You know, that's a very important point, you know, because when we think of human capital, people tend to think of the sort of skills and education that we must have. But you know, it turns out again, you can have all the skills you want. If you are not somebody that is basically an honest person, somebody who knows how to treat each other with the kind of respect that they need to have, all that education and skill would not matter. And that is where the values come in. Values are crucial to our development. In fact, they make the difference to the quality of life. And you said our parents and grandparents, they try to teach us those things, and in many cases they have succeeded. One of the things that worries me today is a sense I'm having that among our younger people today, I get a sense that they're not sharing some of those values. And one of the challenges I think we have as older people is to see if we could begin to really, we can correct that. Because if in fact our young people do not understand that being their brother's keeper is central to what living in a society means, if they grow up believing that what is important is just looking after themselves, I think this place we call in this region that has been, as you say, a region where people are happy to be part of this region. But if we don't hold on to those values, the place is not going to be a place where any of us will want to live. So one of the challenges I think we have is to keep passing on to our young people, both by our example and by talking to them, showing them that it really makes sense for us to be persons who, as much as important as it is to be responsible and look after ourselves, that's not what it is all about. It is more importantly about using our skills and using some of our time for the benefit of those that are around us. That is what it is about. Because if everybody does that, the society is definitely going to benefit. And it is for us to try to pass that on.
So we have it from a sage, you may say, but let us get the perspective of a young person. That is Francis Severin. Francis, do you share those views of Professor? Because I just want to add another value which you and I am familiar with, because we would call it Kudme.
Yes.
In Dominica. Trinidad may call it something else, but that led into voluntarism. What is happening to this in Dominica? Do we still have those values?
Well, you know, I risk gilding the lily if I add anything to what Professor Theodore has said, because he has said it so well. But as he spoke, you know, Felix, I reflected on a song by, and you know I like my reggae, Nanette Silk.
Yes.
Let's all spread the love. You know, and in fact, a lot of the reggae songs, Bob Marley, Barry Zaman, have that sort of theme in it. And as he spoke, I reflected on also Dr. Tennyson Joseph's lecture last year, which took those ideas and brought it to the realm of the macro politics. And the theme was neoliberalism, primitive accumulation, and generational decline. Generational decline in the sense that the values that were instilled in us before were reflected in our former leaders. Today, these values have whittled away, have been eroded, and you have a different type of approach. And that is where the primitive accumulation comes in. So, Professor is very correct to say that we may have as many skills as we might. We may have a lot of education. In fact, he has probably answered the question that others have raised, that how is it that you have more education now and less knowledge, so to speak, less, if you will, transfer that education to the wellness of people. You have more medical doctors and less health, more lawyers and less justice, more, one may even add, I don't think he said that, so I'm adding this one now, more religious men and women and less Christianity.
But don't shy to add more sociologists and more crime.
Well, that too. That too.
That was one meant for you.
And it is probably, we have isolated the point. The values have gone away. So honesty, courtesy, love, respect, and so on, you know, and building each other's self-esteem and caring for each other. The kudma you spoke of, or even in Jamaica it's called the partner system, you know, and those things have gone away because people don't want each other to know what they're doing because they want to spring a surprise that I have gotten ahead of you.
Better.
You know, and Felix is scary because it's happening within primary and secondary schools. Yes, the level of I'm not saying that you should allow each other, students to copy on each other, but they shield their work more out of wanting to get ahead. I'm not going to share with the next parent what was said in school today, even though your child was absent. I've gotten a lot of material, but I'm not letting you know where I've gotten it from. And the fact is that if we have a lot of criminals out there, even if we do well, we won't be able to leave our homes. You know?
You know, it's interesting that Francis said that, because my father used to say, you know, that when we tell him that there are kids that always want us to kind of help them with their work and so on, he says, make sure and help them. There are two reasons why you should help them. The first is that when you help them, you don't lose anything. So you don't have less. But the second is that as you help them and you explain things to them, you understand it better. You know, and I think that something like that that's because as Francis, this isn't of hiding from each other. That is one of the values that we have to try and share with them. That does not make sense because they don't lose anything.
Yes. In fact, similarly, you know, Professor Lawrence Carrington, our former rector, Pro-Vice Chancellor, you must know him, Prof. At a graduation ceremony here, he said that what is unique about education, it is a commodity that we can share without losing it.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's true. That is very true.
So that we do not lose the wisdom of Professor Karl Theodore on social security, I just want to rekindle what was delivered at the lecture, where he spoke about the social security in the region in terms of production, equity, and solidarity. For the benefit of many who may not have heard it on radio, but always the entire country listens to the special program of the University of the West Indies. So here is your chance to tell us, how did you tie those three elements to social security and economic development of the region?
Okay, well, Felix, as I said last night, what struck me was that our development seemed not to be going as it should. It seemed to have been stalled. And then it occurred to me that some agencies, some institutions need to start doing things very differently. And as a Social Security person, it also hit me that what we focus on in Social Security is building up this pool of savings. And we're hoping that in the next 20, 30, 40 years, people who have retired will then have access to the savings. But the reality is that over that 40 years, prices keep going up. And if you are having this savings and prices are diminishing the value of those savings, it seemed to me that you who are responsible for the savings should also take the kind of measures that would protect those savings from the damage that the price level could do. And it is in that context, it seemed to me that if the Social Security is sitting on these vast resources, they are investing the resources, yes, but they are investing it in areas that are not impacting on the development of the society. And all I was saying was that the time has come when they have to think again and say, well, look, some of these resources, nobody's asking to put all of them, but some of the resources should be invested in activities which would protect the value of the savings. It means that if in the economy we know that the level of production in agriculture in many of our countries in the region, agriculture is one of the sectors that impacts on the price level immensely. As soon as agricultural production falls, the rate of inflation goes up. It means to say that you need something that will ensure that the level of agricultural production in these countries does not fall. For the level of production in construction, same thing, and in manufacturing. The problem is that these are areas which have risk. And the history of Social Security is to invest in things that do not have risk. But I'm saying that although that may have been a good thing in the past, and it makes sense in a context where there's no inflation. Where there's inflation, you cannot say you are investing in things that don't have risk. For two reasons. First, the things that don't have risk are the things where the rates of return tend to be lowest. And as I said before, while you are investing, the prices are increasing and are eroding the value of what you are investing. So it seems to me you have to face up to the risk and say, well, what do we do with our resources to help the price level to keep from rising as it is doing, but to do it in a way which does not put our funds at more risk than we need to. And what we do, the suggestion we made was first, well, if you first have to make sure that the people that are doing the investment for you know what they are doing. So you don't just pick people and say, help us to do the investment. You really make sure that you select investment managers of a high caliber, people who have experience and who know what they are doing. But apart from that, the second important thing, what I'm suggesting we do, is that we link up with the other agencies that have resources, right, and face the same risk. And we're talking about the credit unions and trade unions. Well, the trade unions sit on huge pension funds, and the trade unions have huge levels of savings. Again, so these are if all of these institutions can be encouraged to pull together, it means that each one, that the exposure of each is going to be less, but the impact on the price level will benefit everyone. Now, the second, one of the bonuses of that is if the Social Security links with the credit unions and the trade unions to help to keep the price level down, what they are also doing is to be addressing the poverty situation in the region, because again, the rising prices is one of the major problems that poor people face. And anything we can do to make sure that the price level is not rising, that will also help with poverty. Now, but because of this poverty concern, I was suggesting as well that the government could be invited to join in this investment trust that we are talking about. So we have the trade unions, the credit unions, and the government with this social security. And given that we are small countries, it means that the required level of investment, when we divide it among these 4 different agencies, for each agency, it is not going to be very significant. And I'm saying that it is something that the time has come when we have to think about it, and we have to investigate it in a way to find ways to make it practical. How can we make it happen in our individual countries? One of the points that was made last night is that the idea, it's going to work for countries, it can work for the region as well, because the Social Security regions, the Social Security institutions in the region, they can combine in a way that they can work through the Caribbean Development Bank to target certain productive areas in particular countries, and again, do what they need to do to keep prices from going up. So it is just something I think that it is not, Felix, it is not a new idea. In fact, it's an idea that was put forward to the Social Security institutions in the region more than a decade ago. And your own Dr. Valda Henry, she has always been excited by the idea, and she has herself been a great supporter of it. I think it's something that we as university have to keep engaging the Social Security institutions about, because we have to understand why they may be sort of timid to move in that direction. So we have to work with them to show them how it is feasible, first of all, but then also show them how it is practical. And that is, I think, that is the point I think we really have reached now. Yeah.
Yes. So, Professor, you have spoke extensively about production. I think I had also mentioned equity. How does that fit in, and how does also solidarity, which I think you addressed equity, solidarity with the partnership, but equity, what does that mean?
Equity, you know, one of the interesting things, as I said last, that we have learned now is that in those countries where they are seriously addressing their income distribution problem and try to make the income distribution better, those are the countries where poverty rates are also falling fastest. You know, so there seems to be then a link between equity and poverty. The more fairness we have in our society, the less poverty we are going to have. The question is, how does equity happen? Well, equity happens when people combine their resources together to look after problems that everybody faces. That is because then everybody has a fair share of what has been brought together. But the combining of resources, that is where solidarity is. Because solidarity is the principle which says that the problems that we face are best addressed if we link up, if we combine our ideas, combine our resources, and then use that combined power to deal with whatever is in front of us. Now, if, once we talk solidarity, we talk social security, but that is what social security is really about. It's a question of pooling resources to ensure that everybody has a better opportunity. And I'm saying that we need to find a way that our social policies, our public policies should now be reflecting this solidarity principle. Now I want to say, I mean, I'm saying that, but I'm very aware of the fact that people today are very conscious and very sensitive about their personal freedoms. People like to know that their own circumstances are what should be important. But I think the more we think about it, the nature of the problems we're facing in the region at this time in our history are not problems that can be addressed from an individualistic perspective. They are problems which have to be addressed from coming together to ensure that the individual welfare is looked at. The welfare of individuals depends on what we do together. Now that is how Social Security works, because in the final analysis, the Social Security institutions are trying to ensure that each of us is in a better position. So that is an individualistic, that's a purpose, but it does not address the problem from an individualistic way. It says, look, in order to address it, let us pool. And I'm saying that principle is what we have to try to get into our public policy. What I'm suggesting is that people who believe in the Social Security principle, now some of us, many of us are professionals working for the government and for different public agencies. I'm saying the time has come and we have to try as Social Security people to get that solidarity principle central to what we are doing. And once we do that, equity is going to follow.
Okay.
Yeah?
Well, let us just take a little break for our sponsors now, the University of the West Indies, and we will be right back to get much more from Professor Karl Theodore.
I'm part of a tough, smart,
Constantly evolving,
never too old to learn community of human beings.
proud of country,
Proudly Caribbean, global citizens.
with convenient access to over 400 learning programs
Delivered both online and face-to-face.
from the Caribbean's University of First Choice.
My mind,
My life.
my world of possibilities is wide open.
Call, click, or visit the UWI Open Campus.
So, let us hear the voice of Dr. Francis Severin on the question of, because I hear overtones from Professor Karl Theodore of Caribbean integration. I don't know if I maybe jumping the gun. Economy of scales, Caribbean integration, that falls into CSME. Do you share those views, Dr. Severin?
Well,
is that what you're getting from what Karl said?
Actually, the word that interests me a lot more, well, I mean, apart from Caribbean integration, which is a very honorable ideal, is equity, because it's a word that is very much employed in sociology as well. And as I listened, I reflected that this concept of equity, it is something like randomness in sampling in sociology. So that if you have to draw a sample that is fair, a sample that reflects the population,
yeah.
so to speak, then you have to give the concept of randomness.
Everybody an
equal. Everybody has a fair, equal chance. And that is what equity is all about. So that, and the point was made at the lecture, how do you arrive at this equity as an antidote to poverty? How do you select people to serve on boards, Social Security, for instance, or even national credit unions, and any board, educational boards and so on, scholarship, human resources, that will allow the greater good for the greater number to survive. And the professor gave a very short but effective response, that you take people from all political, if you will, sides, because that is the basis of it, and we cannot escape the politicization of our society. But the fact is that we have to work with it and find people who we claim are objective, and the best way to do that is getting people from everywhere. Yeah. And so we come back to the values again. What do you want for your society? The question of sustainable development. What are you doing now that will not do irreparable violence and damage to the probability of success of your future generations? And Felix, that is where I really worry. That is where I get anxiety. That we are, in a sense, we do not need full gratification. We're doing things now if we can get some quick buck in our pockets, but we are not thinking of what happens to our children. I mean, even if you leave the academic realm and you go into the biblical realm that speaks of the sins of the father, that sort of troubles the generations after. You know, don't make a graven image onto yourselves, and that is what we're doing, and that is what I suspect Karl Marx spoke of, that we deify society, we deify certain people in society, and we forget the greater good. So that question of equity, okay, being the antidote to poverty, I think that is something that we as university must hang on to, and in our outreach exercises, we must really try to, serve as change agents just for that, because apparently, if we're talking about human capital, the skills and the health alone would not do it. It has to be underpinned by that value of equity.
Okay. I'm happy you said that, but Dr. Severin, I know you as a judge for Calypso shows, although your forte is for reggae music. I never quite understand
it's
that.
It's from the same genre.
It's the same genre.
Actually.
But, and no wonder, one of my favorite Calypsonians in Dominica, Lord Lugas, did not get a place when he sang They Want It Now, in reference to children, internet children as he referred to them, modern day kids, they want it now. But Professor, I come to you and ask, there is throughout the region a concept by political leaders. I used to admire those of the past, Dr. Eric Williams, Errol Barrow, Eugenia Charles, Compton, even Burnham. These had character. That's my view about the past politicians. I had a very sound image of them because I thought they meant well for their respective countries and for the Caribbean. But the common man is what is used throughout the region. Everybody wants to alleviate poverty by addressing the problems of the common man. But in some countries, they encourage what is called dependency. They give handouts. Is that any solution to bettering the quality of life and alleviating poverty? What are your views?
No, I think that's a very important question, because the first thing we will say is that the transfers that are made in the different countries to people who are poor, that transfers are important and something that are necessary, because there are some people, if they don't get these transfers, of course, they wouldn't have anything. They might even starve. So that transfers are important. So I don't think we'll be saying that a policy of transfers is not something that should not be there. But I think where we have to be careful, and it comes back to something that that Francis said just now about delayed gratification. Now, Professor Arthur Lewis, he was the first Nobel Prize winner from this region. He's from St. Lucia. And one of the things he got famous for was convincing us that savings are very important to economic growth. But in his Nobel Prize lecture, he made a statement which really resonated with me. He said, you can have all the savings and capital accumulation you want. If you don't have enough people in the population who are willing to make sacrifices for the future, you're not going to get the development you're really going at. Now that hit me on two levels. It told me, well, what he's actually saying is that the development is not just about the savings and capital. It's really about what people do. But what it also meant is that the development, there's a side to develop. There's a software side, I call it, because the kind of people we are will determine the kind of development that and I think that side of his development thinking is not something I think that people were tending to look at before. They were looking at about the structure of the society, the structure of the economy, but not looking at the kind of people we are. And here's Lewis saying, the kind of people we are is going to make a difference. Now, I'm saying that to make the point that you have poverty. In other words, we can say that the households, there are many households in the region that suffer from something we call income deficiency, okay? And the question is, how do you address the income deficiency? Well, there are two kinds of approaches. One approach is to say, I will deal with the income deficiency as essentially a sort of consumption problem. These people need things to eat, so we'll give them things where they will have things to eat. The other thing is to say, I will look at the income deficiency as an income security problem. In other words, I will try to build up these people, give them the kind of capacity so they can provide incomes for themselves after a while. Now, what we know is that if you keep doing it the first way, treating it as a consumption problem, the poverty will keep coming at you all the time because the people will remain in the same condition they are in, and therefore you wouldn't be addressing the poverty over time. On the other hand, if you treat it as a human capital problem, you say, well, of course we have to give you support, but while we're giving you this support, we expect you to do certain things. There's training that is going to be available. In some of the Latin American countries, what they are doing now, the people in these short-term programs, they only continue in those short-term programs if they can show the people that their children in school are doing better and better. In other words, they're saying, you better make sure your children are doing well, otherwise you're not staying in this program. And so what they're saying is that you are in this program, but we don't want your children to come into this program. In other words, build up human capital. One of the things that we keep suggesting to people is that Caribbean households have to see themselves as producers of human capital. Because it is in the households the decisions are made as to about the education of the children. Just as with the training of, as I said just now, human capital is not just about skills and everything, it's also about training, about values. And that is where it is in the households. And if you could encourage our public policy makers to link these transfers to human capital development on the part of the people receiving the transfers, I have no problems with the transfers. Where I am absolutely, I have no support at all for transfers that simply are transfers that don't encourage the people getting them to improve themselves. That's the position, I think.
Yeah, thank you for this. It's enlightening. And while you spoke, I thought of a regular commentator on this TV station who always echoes the theme, teach a man to fish. And
same idea.
that is much better than just giving him a fish.
Yeah, but you really have to do both. You have to do both, because sometimes if you don't give him the fish, he will starve.
Yes.
So you really have to give him. But don't just give him the fish.
Yes.
You have to teach him as well.
Yes, it has to be conditioned. Yeah. Doc, I see you nodding.
No, I mean, this has been, this is really refreshing, is the word that comes to mind, because again, Prof has been unequivocal. You know, clarity. And as you spoke about giving a man fish as opposed to teaching him to fish, I have a note here, because that is what I got from it. I tried to build a theoretical framework here. Giving him fish is a consumption aspect.
Yes. Right, exactly.
And the human capital aspect, or building capacity, is teaching him to fish. You know? And the question, in fact, a colleague from Mona had said, we were talking about politics and politicians and governments and so on. And, you know, he was sharing that some politicians say, we love poor people. And you have to interpret that well. Does it mean that you genuinely love poor people and you want to, therefore, alleviate, assuage their plight in a sustainable way? And if that's what you want to do, then that is honorable, because you're seeing them as producers of human capital. But if you love them in the sense of loving to have them around so that they remain dependent on you and therefore feed your agenda of primitive accumulation, which is, of course, the consumption sort of treatment of people, then that is bad. And I think where the equity comes in is that we have to take our people, the poor people that we love, treat them as producers of human capital. And I like that program that you spoke about, so that the next generation will not be in these poverty programs. The next generation will not be in queues waiting for handouts. So, you know, when people like me and Felix and so on speak of the dependency syndrome or not wanting handout, that is what we're saying. We are not saying, and some people are very dishonest and immoral and depraved in terms of how they interpret it. We're not saying that you do not give to poor people, because you say, as you say, you will starve. You need to give him fish. But you do not need him to come back for fish every day, treating him as a consumer. Let us feed him. We need to take him or her and treat them as human capital to produce, so that as the generations go on, or even within his same generation, intra-generation, that he moves to a better place. And that is what we're saying.
Okay, that almost sounds like West Indian cricket team, what should be done with them. Not only do they have the skill and the talent, but then I'm hearing that they need the mental capacity to be able to win those matches. As the captain said, we are losing, yes, but we're losing in 5 days. The teams before lost in 3 days. I don't know how the situation is different. But let us take a break for our sponsors at this point, the University of the West Indies.
That's a way to put it.
I'm part of a tough, smart,
Constantly evolving,
never too old to learn community of human beings.
proud of country,
Proudly Caribbean, global citizens.
with convenient access to over 400 learning programs
Delivered both online and face-to-face.
from the Caribbean's University of First Choice.
My mind,
My life.
my world of possibilities is wide open.
Call, click, or visit the UWI Open Campus.
And then, well, I spoke about cricket, and not to give Sammy any blows or the West Indies cricket team. They have to learn to win. We need to give them the tools, be it mental and otherwise, to do so. But I am so intrigued, Professor Karl, that your unit, the Health Economic Unit, is that what
Well,
you represent?
Its original name was the Health Economics Unit.
Yes.
But we became a university center in 2006. So we changed the name to the HEU, Center for Health.
Center for Health Economics. Okay. And that leads me to asking you about what is plaguing our countries in the Caribbean. We have the second highest rate, not the second highest in terms of numbers of persons with HIV and AIDS, but the rate of infection and having the disease AIDS is second to, as they say, sub-Saharan Africa. They always leave the northern parts. It's northern parts like Egypt, Tunisia, and Libya seen more as Arab countries than African countries, which is a big misnomer. But coming to it, non-communicable diseases in the region. Recently, the New York mayor sent out a decree saying that they're going to ban large sodas from the scene in New York, because some 58% of New Yorkers are obese. No, you laugh, Dr. Severin. I don't know where you fall in the statistics, but in Dominica, I understood some 60% of our women are obese, and some around 30 or 40% of men. Where do you fall, Dr. Severin? But don't answer me
I'm
yet.
outside of that.
Outside of that range.
My glucose and everything is fine.
The normal range. But still with you, from a health point of view, I always believe not only do we encourage our kids to have the KFCs and the pizzas and so on, and governments encourage those consumers to come in to influence the economy. It's not one get towards production, it's more consumption. I also think that people have to concentrate on large servings, which is an American problem and increasingly so in the Caribbean, large servings of food and hence obesity. But tell us, what is the contribution that the University of the West Indies is making towards those that you identify, the non-communicable disease, HIV and AIDS? How active is your unit or the health department or the economics department viewing this as a problem that is affecting the economies of the countries in the Caribbean? What are we in UWI doing? And what should we be doing?
Well, there are two kinds of things we are doing right now. The first is we are doing studies which will tell the countries in a very clear way what the economic impact of these diseases is on their country. So we have for HIV, we have done it on a few countries, and we are trying to do it on the rest now. And for the chronic diseases, we have just started to do those as well. Because what our experience is that until the governments see what the impact of the diseases on the economies, they tend not to respond in the way that they are required to. The HIV was an example. HIV started to hit us in the early 1980s. And you know, the ministries of health were doing different things and so on. But the kind of problem that HIV is, you needed more than the Ministry of Health to respond. But that wasn't happening. But in 1998-99, we did the first impact study. We did a study on Jamaica and on Trinidad, which showed categorically that the impact on the GDP was significant. And using basic data from the other countries, we were able to work out what a similar impact would be. And with the Caribbean Epidemiology Center, we linked with them. And we went around to all the countries, telling them and showing them different cabinets, different parliaments. We showed them what the impact was. This was all 1998, 1999. By 2000, these countries got together through a CARICOM, and they started to each by one by one they drew up national response programs. So it was a clear case that once they saw what the impact was on, and it makes sense, because if you have to keep getting revenues and the epidemic is destroying the base from which those revenues are coming, you had better make sure that you deal with that epidemic. Now, as for the chronic diseases, now we are doing the same thing. We're trying to estimate what the impact is. So that's the first thing. But the second thing that we need to do, which we also did for HIV, we estimated what the cost of responding to the epidemic was. We looked at what the response was going to require, and we calculated what was the scale of investment that the countries needed to think about if they are going to respond. And for the chronic diseases, we are doing exactly the same thing. So they'll have two bits of information. What the impact will be on the economy if you do nothing, and then what the cost of responding is going to be. Now, in the case of HIV, it was interesting. The impact on the economy was of the order of between 4 and 6% of the country's national income. The cost of responding was coming up to less than 1% of the national income. So that itself told the government something. That look, if we don't respond, we'll keep losing 4 to 6%. For us to respond, it will cost us less than 1%. And I think those kind of arguments are the kinds of things that by the work we are doing, we are hoping to make an impact in the way countries are going to respond. Because let me tell you, with the chronic diseases in particular, the response by the governments is crucial. Now, people, I'm always puzzled that there's one country in the world, Finland. Finland started a program against these chronic diseases. They started all through the legal system. Now in Finland, for example, if you are producing something, the law tells you how much salt could be in things like that. And what we're seeing in Finland is rates of hypertension keep coming down. Heart disease keeps coming down. And I'm saying here you have a country which is showing that by legislative response, it is making a significant difference. And why the other countries are not following them, I don't know. Now, I'm saying that in this region, we have to start putting pressure on our governments to intervene to make that difference. You have the fast food places. Now, we all know, I mean, the evidence is clear that what the fast foods have in them are not good for us. Now, I'm not saying that you have to ban the fast food, but you have to let the fast foods know what is allowable and what is not. But see, that isn't going to happen except more people begin to demand of our leaders that's the kind of response. But again, we are saying that by the work we are doing, we are hoping that more people are going to be educated, knowing what is possible, what is it costing us if we don't do anything, and therefore giving us a deeper motivation to make the kind of changes that we really need to make.
Yes. Professor, you keep saying we. I'm with you because I'm part of the family, but I should remind persons, whenever the word we is used on this program, it always refers to the University of the West Indies. Because think of it, you, we, that is you and we, collectively. Doc, in a minute so, Dr. Severin, you heard what Professor said the University of the West Indies is doing. And we always have to remind people, because we get knocked about as the University of the West Indies as if not addressing the mandate which was given some 60 years ago, or 63 years ago, that is to serve the community, the Caribbean community. What are your views?
Well, you know, Felix, again, the important point, the cost of not educating people far outweighs the cost of educating them. That's a basic and elementary point. All right? And let me make the point, because I hinted at it last night. Felix, you know, we have, and in the open campus, which is part of the University of West Indies, we started in 2008, the annual Dr. Bernard A. Serendo Memorial Lectures. And just listen to some of the topics. Occupational respiratory disease, wisdom, wellness, and wealth, which dealt with these chronic non-communicable disease. The chronic non-communicable disease epidemic, a possible solution for Dominica. Conquering chronic non-communicable disease in children, Antigua's battle. Then last year, the health of the nation is the wealth of the nation. But what is health and how do we achieve it? And that was, again, about chronic non-communicable disease. Now, even listening to Professor's lecture nights ago, tell me, wouldn't the population have missed something if it didn't listen to it, if it wasn't part of that? The Government Information Service does not come to these lectures. So a wide range of people actually miss these lectures. Who is being hurt? Not you, because you listen to those things. Not your children, not me, not Professor, but the population out there who is being denied by decision of one or two selfish people to hear those things. And that is what the University of West Indies, the open campus, has tried to do. And when we invite certain media, they don't come. And the GIS is bad that way. And again, we have to praise mapping for always being on board. And so all the others, SAT, Q95, Kyrie, they come, they attend. Because the whole idea is to educate all people, make them sensitive to those things. And that is how you build the equity, by allowing all of them that piece of the knowledge.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Severin. I know he would always speak passionately about what we are doing, the University of the West Indies. And I'll just have Professor Karl to say final words to the Dominican public, because I think you were very well received, not only by the audience at the Fortium Hotel, but your presence here and the explanation that you gave to the role of the Social Security and your passion, like we have here, and share for the University of West Indies and what it should continue to do in development of the region. Professor.
So I think the main thing I would like to leave with the public of Dominica is that the problems we have they are really serious problems. And we must not downplay them. But we have to have a confidence in ourselves to deal with these problems. And that confidence will come from our willingness to band together and deal with them. And you see that banding together to deal with our problems, I think that is the way we have to go. This way there's a tendency in our small countries to be fighting against each other. There is a kind of bitterness that we have to work against and try to make sure that our children especially don't grow up with that. Our children have to grow up knowing that working together is the way to solve the problems of this region. On that note, I think if we do that, the Caribbean will remain a very beautiful place to live.
That's a very good lesson, and I just need to compliment the staff of the Dominica Social Security. I think some 80% of the staff attended this lecture. Well, just wait. Come July, the third Thursday, another special program, UWI and You. Thank you for viewing and listening.